Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Como Live, brought to you by the Legacy Amendment. My name is Anne and I'm here today to talk to you all about leopard geckos. I have brought a little leopard gecko friend. This is Sunny. He is a 4-year-old leopard gecko, one of many we have at Como. And I'd start, I guess, by giving an opportunity to guess, why do you think he is called a leopard gecko? If you were to look at him, and I'll take him out here so you can see him a little better without the container, but why do you think he's called a leopard gecko? He's like, I gotta get used to being in hands here. If you thought he's called a leopard gecko because of the spots, you are correct. Someone saw them and said, hey, that looks kind of like a leopard, gonna call it a leopard gecko. Bam, that's how they got their name. So this is Sunny, a 4-year-old leopard gecko. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about how leopard geckos are adapted to survive. So first, real quick, adaptation, definition of that is physical or behavioral traits that plants and animals have that help them survive in the wild. So that's what we're going to be talking about today with leopard geckos like Sunny. And first, in order to talk about how they survive in the wild, we need to talk about where they live in the wild. So leopard geckos are very common as pets. They're a really popular lizard to get as a pet, kind of a beginner lizard. But they originally come from Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, India, and Nepal. So that area. And there used to be kind of a thought that they lived in the deserts of those areas, but actually they really prefer to have areas that are like scrub, arid, dry grasslands. So they're not really big fans of like strong, bright sunlight. They're not big fans of just straight sand. They like rocky crevices, arid, dry scrublands, and grasslands. So let's talk a little bit about how leopard geckos like Sunny survive in the wild. We're going to talk about 2 physical traits they have and then 2 behavioral traits. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how they get their name, those spots. You can see Sunny has some really nice spots. And leopard geckos in captivity as pets can actually come in a lot of different colors. They're selectively bred to have different color morphs, so you can have leopard geckos that are all white or all black or yellow bodies and spotty tails. There's just over 100 different color morph varieties. But in general, in the wild, they're kind of a drab spotted color. Even Sunny here, he gets a nice name, Sunny, from his bright yellow color. He'd be a little more brightly colored than you'd find them in the wild. But those spots do serve a purpose. In the wild, in general, leopard geckos are nocturnal. And so those spots help break up patterns and make it harder for them to see. If they're out at night, those spots kind of help make it look like shadows and help them hide from predators. Their predators tend to be snakes, foxes, other reptiles, as well as birds of prey. So spots are good camouflage. I also want to talk a little bit about his tail, both in the color of his tail as well as the function of his tail. So first let's talk about the color, because as you see, Sunny's got a nice bright yellow body and a white tail. And that's intentional from a natural perspective, and that's because he wants to draw attention to that tail. Gecko tails, you can see it's extra chubby, very cute right now. They can actually store extra fat in their tails, just like camels can store fat in their humps. And that can help them survive times of lack of resources. So low on water, low on food, they live in arid scrublands, and so they can have those periods. So they can store that extra fat in that tail. But they also like to draw attention to that tail because leopard geckos, like many reptiles or lizards, have a fracture point in that tail, where if they are under attack and something grabs them by the tail, they can basically release that tail and run away. And the tail will actually wiggle or continue to move for up to 30 minutes after it's detached from the leopard gecko's body. And so that wiggling tail will help kind of lure that predator to that movement, which allows the rest of the gecko to escape. And the fact that the tail is a different color than the rest of his body will hopefully lure that first attack to the tail instead of the rest of the body, because obviously if a gecko is going to get bitten, he'd prefer it be on his tail rather than on his head. He can then basically just immediately start to regrow that tail. It does take some time. It's not obviously instantaneous. It takes a lot of time and energy to regrow a tail. But they do want to have that tail as soon as possible because it does store that extra fat for them. Gecko who's regrowing a tail, that tail will never look exactly the same as the original tail. It tends to be shorter or stumpier and tends to be kind of fatter looking, so it just doesn't never get this kind of like nice beautiful length that they have. It's always a little stumpier and shorter, and every once in a while it'll actually be a little bit of a different color or different pattern from the original tail on the rest of their body. So they have a really, really cool tail. One of their behavioral adaptations that helps them survive is the fact that they like to live in burrows. So they are nocturnal, which means of course that they're awake at night and sleep during the day. So during that daytime, they find little burrows or rock crevices to hide and sleep. Not only does that keep them safe from higher temperatures, but also helps keep them safe from predators. If you're hidden, you don't need to worry about being eaten, and then you come out at night and you rely on the camouflage spots to help you stay safe during night. So they use burrows to help keep safe during the day. Another really cool behavioral adaptation that leopard geckos have is they can go into what's called brumation. So most everyone's familiar with hibernation, and that's the mammal form. Brumation is actually the reptile form. And so brumation is when a reptile gets too cold or it's basically too extreme weather for them to kind of be awake, and so their whole metabolism just slows down and they go kind of into a torpor-like state where they're kind of sleeping. And so in the places where they live, in Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, India, and Nepal, sometimes the weather can get as low as 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which for a little lizard, like all reptiles, they're cold-blooded. That's pretty cold for them. And so in order to save energy, they can go into a state of brumation, which is a modified hibernation, until it warms up again for them to then come out and begin hunting and surviving. I didn't mention what they like to eat. Leopard geckos are primarily insectivores, and so that means they like to eat insects and spiders and anything kind of crunchy that can go in their mouth. But they also have been known to eat small vertebrates, so perhaps a baby mouse, or they have also been known in times of extreme kind of starvation or really lacking of food, they might actually even eat a baby leopard gecko. And so it's kind of sad to think of, but if they're hungry enough, they'll eat kind of just about anything that will fit in that mouth. But primarily they like to eat worms, grubs, insects, those types of things. As I said earlier, Sunny here is 4 years old. He's one of our education animals here at Como. And so you wouldn't be able to see him just by coming to visit, but you would get a chance to maybe see him or one of his co-workers if you came for a school program or you booked a birthday party here when we're able to have those again. Leopard geckos in the wild, if they are able to make use of all those adaptations, can live up to 15 years, which is pretty good for a little lizard like this. Under human care, in the pet trade, it's kind of generally assumed that they can live anywhere from 10 to 20 years old. But I do like to share that we have an extremely old grandma gecko here at Como. Her name is Bashful, and she has this year turned 30 years old, which is just an incredible age for a leopard gecko. I was hoping to bring her today, but she is retired from programs like this. She has earned her retirement being 30 years old. But if you saw the little picture of the leopard gecko earlier today on Facebook showing that we were coming, that is her photo. So if you want to see our grandma gecko Bashful, her photo was on that earlier Facebook post. He says he's going to explore a little bit. Leopard geckos are, of course, a reptile. We can tell that they're a reptile because they have scaly skin. And in this case, they have kind of what's called a pebble scale. So some animals, some reptiles have actual little scales, but some lizards have pebble scales, and that's what leopard geckos have. He's kind of got like this kind of rough, almost warty kind of feeling and appearance. And like all reptiles, they do shed their skin. Some reptiles will shed scale to scale, but leopard geckos shed their skin all at once, kind of like a snake. And then another way that they can use that to help survive is that they will actually eat that skin once they've shed it. Because they live in places that have such scarce resources sometimes that they do not want to waste a single opportunity to get some nutrition. And so that skin can actually be a really good source of nutrition for them. So once they've shed their skin, they actually consume that skin to help get some of those resources back. I'll give a minute. If anyone has any questions, you can certainly feel free to toss them in the comments. Otherwise, watch him here for another minute and then let him head home here. He's posing. He's like, I'm so handsome. Look at me. All right, well, if anyone has any other comments, please continue to leave them. I will continue to answer questions on Facebook if they come up later in the video. Oh, I see we do have a question coming in. Go ahead.
Matthew would like to know, how big can they get?
Matthew would like to know, how big can they get? This is typically a full average-sized leopard gecko. Boys tend to be a little bit bigger than girls. However, when I was talking about those color morphs, or there's different colors you can get of leopard geckos, of captive bred geckos, one morph that some people are working on are considered giant morphs. So geckos that are larger than what you would normally find in the wild, or the normal sized geckos. And there's actually I saw that there's 2 different morphs for that. One of them is like 2 inches longer, and one of them can be even up to 4 inches longer than a normal gecko. But in general, this would be a full-sized gecko for you. I see we have another question.
Yeah, we've got another one. It's how often do they shed their skin?
Ooh, the question is, how often do they shed their skin? So like most reptiles, younger animals shed more often because they're growing, and older animals shed less frequently. And so they can shed like somewhere around once a month, a little more or a little less. Baby geckos, when they hatch, they have their first shed typically within 24 to 48 hours, and that shed skin is their actual very first meal. They will not eat anything until they eat that very first shed. So that's kind of an interesting little tidbit. As geckos get older, they can have troubles shedding. Sometimes it's hard for them to get the skin off their toes. That can lead to like constriction, and they might actually like lose toes. In the wild, that can be obviously a really big concern for their survival. But under human care, we can make sure that they have extra care to help them get that skin off their toes, add a little bit of humidity, make sure they have lots of opportunities to be healthy. I see we have another question.
Do you know what the purpose is of the white underbelly?
Do we know what the purposes of the white underbelly is? That's a really good question. I would think it's something along the lines of counter shading, which is a very common camouflage technique, I guess, for many animals who rely on camouflage. And that's anytime you have a white or light colored belly and a dark colored back. And that often comes from animals that are going to be seen from above or below. So if you think of like penguins, they have counter shading because they're going to be seen from above by predators and below. Many birds that are flighted have a lighter color stomach and a darker back because they want to blend in with the sky or blend in the ground. And so I think the lighter belly is just a form of counter shading because they're going to be seen more often from above. They want to have that modeling to look like shadows, but they're not going to be seen from below, so there's no purpose really to have those spots in a darker color. Good question.
Mary would like to know, do they have good eyesight at night?
Do they have good eyesight? Leopard geckos have excellent eyesight. So they actually have a really great sense of hearing and a really great eyesight. They have really cute little eyes, I think. And you might be able to see the little slit of his ear right there. And they rely heavily on both their eyesight and hearing to, one, be aware of predators, but also to find the food they're looking for. And one other little interesting tidbit, leopard geckos belong to a family of geckos that have eyelids. So most other geckos, as you think about them, the ones that have sticky feet that can climb on walls, they do not have eyelids, but leopard geckos do have eyelids, so they can blink their eyes. They can also lick their own eyeball too to help keep it clean. So it's kind of interesting that they can both lick their eye and blink their eye to keep their eye clean. But maybe because they live in a kind of a sandy, pebbly area, they want to make sure that their eyes stay nice and clean. Great question. Any other final questions? All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me and Sunny on today's episode of Como Live, all about leopard geckos. Tune in on Monday for our next episode. Thanks so much.